Welcome back to Roster the People, the important nonsense podcast, 32 teams in 32 days. It's the summer edition. And today we're going to do something that is near and dear to my black little heart, which is the Denver Broncos, as you can see from my background. I usually would say I'm looking forward to this, but that would be a lie in this case. There's not, every year, I always keep tabs on how many draftable players each team has. And before we introduce everyone, I'm just going to do this. Normally, in fantasy, per team, there are 5 or 6 draftable players. How many draftable players do we think the Broncos have this year as far as fantasy goes? Mike, take a guess.
I'd say 3 at best.
Interesting guess. Vishaal, take a guess.
I would set the line at 1.5, and I might take the under.
Mike is correct. He's on the button. It's 3. It's exactly 3, making the Denver Broncos the least draftable team that we have done so far this year. They are comfortably under the average. It's incredible. So yeah, normally when you have 5, it's really kind of sad.
Yeah.
6 is the average. 3 is depressing. So Mike, the audience knows Mike. It's at Michael Burland. Mike is on with us all the time. But Vishaal, I think this is the first or second time you've done 32 teams in 32 days.
I think it might be my first. So
I think it might be the first. So introducing Vishaal to the audience. At Vishaal Gupta 95. Vishaal is part of our sports betting team. He works with Mason. The audience knows Mason because Mason was on with us for the last couple shows. And it's funny because Mason also lives out here in Denver with me. So I was actually planning on having him on to do the Denver pity party. And this is actually probably better because that show would have gone off the rails within 6 seconds. Like it would have been really bad. Like, so I'm kind of glad this actually worked out the way it did because that was going to get really sad. It's kind of like last year, Mike, when you and Jason did the Charger show and I sat on mute and sarcastically ate chips for the entire hour because I was just not interested in what was happening. And I kept telling Jason if he talked about Donald Parham that I was going to end the show. And I did. I straight up did. I ended that show the minute Donald Parham comes up. So for the audience, for those who might be new, most people know, but this is your primer for the 2024 fantasy season. So we go team by team. We talk about the moves, the shakes, new people, familiar faces, old places, rookies. This is all based on 12-team PPR, 16-round draft format. That is the standard format for PPR drafting, as I call it, God's format. If you are playing other formats, you are wrong. I'm kidding. But this is the new standard. This is what we do. So this is the majority of people. This is what people find the most helpful. You're going to hear us reference a lot of rankings and a lot of ADPs. Those come courtesy of Fantasy Pros. We are, as always, a Fantasy Pros affiliate. And shout out to Fantasy Pros. We really enjoy working with you every year. You will also hear us reference some of our own rankings. Some people that are on the show, myself included, we are part of the ECR. That's why we use the ECR. So with that, last thing. Today is the 26th of July. So if anything sounds a little weird, a little dated, that would be why. We will do a wrap-up live stream, the big live stream. I think we're targeting the 1st of September at this point for that. So tune into that. We will update any and all takes that need updated depending on how things go. But in the real world, we are just starting training camp. That's where we are at this moment in time. So if anything we say sounds a little odd, tune into the wrap-up thing. It'll be good. So with that, we will start as we always do with quarterback. And this is a really buckle up because this is like there's 3 quarterbacks at play here. None of them are in draftable range. Nobody. But it's Bo Nix, who, as we saw, was drafted by the Broncos. Some would say too early. Some would say this is what you got. This is what your best option was if you were going to do it. But he's the odds-on favorite to win the starting job. You also have Zach Wilson, who is getting in the mix over there. And then you have Jared Stidham. So gross. Not a lot of optimism here. I'm personally a Bo Nix believer. I think it's going to be Bo Nix to start the season because the fan base will not tolerate anything else. Does anyone want to tell me I'm wrong?
Nope.
No, I think it should
spend that much time thinking about the Broncos quarterback situation, if we're being totally honest. So let's go ahead and stick with Bo Nix.
Yeah. That's what I think we talk about. So Bo Nix is an interesting one because if you go by the expert rankings, the expert consensus, Bo Nix is well outside of draftable range. He opens as the QB 30, which would be 234 overall. That's not something you're going to draft, even in a 16-round draft. You're outside of that range. But his ADP is 164. And as always, that tells us that the public is drafting Bo Nix. I think that's a mistake, but I think I also know why. We talk about this from time to time. I think that's just because Bo Nix hasn't disappointed anybody yet. Shiny new toy syndrome, right?
Yeah, there's some theoretical upside, I guess, there. So you can take him as a late stage flyer and hope something magically works out, but not worth it. You can just pick him up off waivers if anything does actually happen well with him. So I don't know what the point is. I'd rather take a defense or special teams or something with my last pick than take a flyer and go next.
I would take a wide receiver. We've listed a bunch of wide receivers. There's a lot of interesting options that are available. I mean, Jermaine Burton's going in around that neighborhood. I would rather do that because that might actually be something. I agree with you, Vishaal. You could just wait and get Bo Nix, even if he does get drafted. Okay, I'll check back on that in 2 weeks when he's back on the waiver wire.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. I don't even think, by the way, just for all the people that are like, oh, Neil's just a bitter Broncos fan. You're right. But here's the thing. It's not like I don't think Bo Nix has any upside. He's going to run. Could be something. But in a 12-team league, you're starting one quarterback. And, if it was a 2 QB league, okay, maybe we have a different conversation. If this is a dynasty league, okay, we might have a different conversation. But for redraft, no. No. This is not worth it. So remember how we talked about 3 players are being drafted? Are like for real being ranked in draftable range and should be being drafted? Bo Nix ain't one of them. Let's talk about somebody who is. Let's get into running back. Let's talk about things that matter. Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams opens as the RB28 in the ECR, which would translate to about 91 overall. His ADP is 98. So the public's a little gun shy on this. Are we ready to move on from Javonte Williams as a show?
It's tough because I think there is value in the Denver backfield just because Sean Payton is kind of been gold for fantasy running backs. It's just we don't know where it's going to come from. We don't know if it's Javonte. We don't know if he's going to – we heard rumors he's going to get cut a month ago, not even going to be on the team. And now he's heading into camp as the number 1 guy, and he lost 11 pounds because he stopped eating Takis or something, right? So it's like I was getting excited about Javonte back in April, and then that report came out of like he could be battling for a roster spot because again, you just look at the numbers: 475 touches for Denver running backs last year, almost over 32% target share, and that's not a Russell Wilson thing. That's a Sean Payton thing. All his Saints teams were always heavily targeting running backs. The question really is like, are we going to be 2 guys? Because we know there's going to be 2, or is it going to be 3 or 4 guys? And there's a possibility it is. So it's a risk. It feels like a little hard to answer this on July 26th, maybe on August 26th, when we do the live stream wrap-up show. Like we'll have a little bit clearer of a picture, and I'll be in on Javonte potentially, but it's tough right now. It's pretty scary to draft him. I do think there's some value in this Denver backfield. I just don't know exactly where it's going to come from.
Yeah, if you could draft this running back room as a full unit, you might want to take them relatively high. But if you have to pick one individual running back, I don't know how you're going to feel comfortable spending, even a top 10 round pick on any of these guys. I'd rather take somebody in the 12th or 13th round, like a P. Ryan or, an SDM or somebody like that who has some upside as a bench guy who could eventually fill in as a starter later in the season. But spending a high round pick on any of these guys would be very, very difficult. Because, again, like Mike said, you don't know where the production's coming from.
That would be an 8th round pick for Javonte Williams is what that translates to. So you're looking at around an 8th rounder is where you're at.
Yeah, that still feels like still too high. I feel like I'd rather wait till a double-digit round to take one of these guys just because I know that's probably going to be somebody on my bench and not somebody I have to rely on to start the season.
Yeah, they're saying the right things because they were telling you all the wrong things a little while before camp. And that's where I always tell people, I bring this up on the show a lot. it's lying season. They're lying to you because these coaches have and these teams have no incentive to tell you the truth. So they're not going to tell you the truth. Like that's just what it is. They lie to you, and it's hard to read too much into what they say. Because yeah, as Mike pointed out, a few weeks ago, Javonte Williams was on the roster bubble. He was going to get cut. He was a cut candidate. And now we're into camp. He's leading the ones in all drills.
Yeah.
He's lost 12 pounds. He looks healthy. And Sean Payton is in the media every day now telling us, and I live in this market. I get it on the radio, whether I like it or not. I get it. And it's every day. He is effusive with his praise of Javonte Williams, talking about what a great year he's going to have and telling you that he's going to lead this backfield. And I'm just sitting there like, which is it, guys? Like, pick one. This is why we also tell people don't draft in July if you can avoid it. Wait until the end of like right before Labor Day. That's when you want to draft for redraft because you get all the information. So it's tough. I'm also finding it very difficult to recommend to anyone that you should take Javonte Williams. It just scares the living hell out of me, especially from what I've seen the last 2 years where he gets something terrible happens. And then it's like, well, you just wasted all this equity. And now I've seen what happens to those teams that get involved with Javonte early. It's like your whole season's run. You can't really ruin your season by taking someone in the 8th round, at least at this point. But here's the other thing. If he does continue on the trajectory that he's been on the last couple weeks, he's going to move back up into that 5th, 6th round, and I will roster no Javonte Williams again because I never do. However, I will tell you what I'm more interested in, and this is more of my thing. Next man up, Jaleel McLaughlin. Opens at the RB 46 in the ECR, translates to about 147 overall. ADP 158. Love it. Love everything about it. Love everything about this. That is the exact right amount of investment for me because it could be nothing and I cut it and I don't care because that's like a 13th round pick and he'd be the last player on my roster. But the upside is tremendous. The upside is that he is the pass catching back on a team that is going to be playing from behind and they're going to be throwing dump offs to him. And we already saw last year that in limited sample, he was incredibly efficient with that type of role. So I would absolutely recommend Jaleel McLaughlin. And I'm got my eye on it though, because if he starts, my concern about him is if they give him a bunch of run during the preseason and people start seeing it, it's going to start getting expensive. And then I'm going to have mixed feelings. But as we sit here in July, if you're asking me, because as Vishaal pointed out, you can't draft them as one package. If I had to pick one, that's my pick. That's the one I recommend. That's the one that I will be targeting myself because it's just, we've seen this before on Sean Payton's teams. They're going to target the running back. They're going to throw those dump offs. And I just wish, honestly, he was a little bit bigger, a little small. That's my one concern is that one good whack. And I think Jaleel McLaughlin could be done. But as he's healthy right now. So I'm in. I'm wheels up on this. Anybody want to tell me I'm crazy?
No, I think I'm right there with you. Like I almost feel like he's the safest in the sense like, all right, I feel like I know he has a floor, and then there's that upside of like, what if they just start to use him even more? You know, like I think he's going to get a good amount, a decent snap percentage. He's going to potentially be their pass catcher, and then the question is, are they going to use him a little bit more on the ground? Because he didn't have a game of double-digit carries last year, so. Yeah, but I'm in on it for sure. We've seen again, go back to Darren Sproles or even the Alvin Kamara with Mark Ingram. Like their pass catching running back can be almost fantasy. It'd be a top 20, top 15 player just from their pass catching almost. So on the ground is kind of just a little bit of extra, especially if you're efficient. So yeah, I 100% agree. He's the guy I want to target.
Yeah, that totally works for me. Easily the most efficient guy in that backfield, 5.4 yards per carry last season, almost a full yard better than the next closest guy, who was P. Ryan at 4.5. So, yeah, totally makes sense. If you're getting him in the 12th, 13th, 14th round, he's like your running back 6 or whatever on your team. Totally makes sense. Totally worth it for me.
Yeah, he's the last position player on my bench. Feeling pretty good about it. Like that's where we are. So and then uh uh I can't really get excited about Samaje Perine because nice player, but he's on the team because he's a locker room guy and because they don't pay him anything. And
Mhm.
every team he's ever been on, coaches always rave about him because he knows what he is. Like he's not an elite athlete per se. So he knows who he has to be, which is that guy. When the coach tells you to go run through that wall, he goes and runs through the wall. Where's my helmet? You know what I mean? He's a better real life football entity than he is fantasy commodity.
Yeah.
And of all the guys on the team, he's the one that's most likely to get cut. And then you have Audric Estime. And help me out, Vishaal. Is it Estime or is it Esteem? Because I've heard this pronounced both ways. Even local media here screws this up.
I've been going with this team, but it could go either way. I'm not.
See, I keep hearing it
I've heard,
Esteem, and then I hear Estime, and I'm like, I don't know. Like I
think
hear
it
it
might be
both ways, and
Estime.
even the beat reporters mess it up. So
yeah.
Okay.
He just real quick, like Samaje Perine caught 50 passes last year,
Yeah.
which just shows what opportunity there is for the other guys, if it becomes a kind of a 2 running back backfield. So
If Jaleel
yeah, just wanted
McLaughlin
to point
caught
that out.
50 passes, you'd be looking at a flex play
Mhm.
every week. And it's like for nothing, for very little investment. And I'm like, and that's where I think we're headed. Just the
Yep.
camp reports, what I've seen, all the credible beat reporting out here, the real beat reporters that are actually like of quality and are out there every day, and I trust, they all say like McLaughlin's the one you want to watch because he's rapidly earning his stripes. Estime is a nice little thing, but he's like 6th-round pick and
He's
5th-round pick.
slow.
And it's like, yeah, slow,
Very
but
slow.
he's the one who would be the main beneficiary of the rushing work if Williams went down again. He'd be the one they just send in there to blast the middle. And then it gets into like, okay, well, McLaughlin's going to be your tempo back, your 3rd down back, your hurry up guy. Like that's what that's going to turn into as long as he can stay healthy. And I think there is a non-zero chance they carry 4 running backs this year. I think there is a chance that all 4 of these guys make the team. But that's also going to come down to, they've also said they're thinking about carrying 3 quarterbacks. And it's like, well, guys, you're probably not going to carry 4 RBs and 3 QBs. So this is what I'm saying. It's July. We're just going to have to let to see this play out. So, but we've covered the 2 that I think you really need to know. So let's talk about wide receiver. Courtland Sutton, the man, the myth, the legend. It's been a weird offseason for Courtland. Looked like he was going to potentially have interest from other suitors outside of Denver. That never really came to fruition. He wanted a new deal. They kind of said no. And then he threatened to hold out. And then they convinced him to report to camp, and he did. And then just yesterday, they reworked his deal to give him $1.5 million in new incentives that he never had. So you could tell, like, they're trying to meet him in the middle. They're trying to give him something. And it's like, I know, is frustrated because I think he thought the market would be better and it just didn't work out. And so now they're basically saying, look, we're going to give you an extra $1.5 million in incentives for showing up to camp on time and being a sport about this. And I think Courtland knows, gonna need to do another thing like we did last year because we're playing for our next contract, whether that's here or elsewhere, probably elsewhere. So it's tough because of all the injuries he's had over the years. I think other teams are looking at him like, maybe you prove that to me one more time, that wasn't a fluke. Because the problem is he's really in, I think, the best situation for him right now, which is being on Sean Payton's team, being Mike Thomas, which is what he does now. He's slow, but he's a big body with all the injuries to the knees. He's slow at this point in his career, but he's really good in the red zone, and he's huge. You cannot teach people to be his size and to use his body to high point footballs the way that he does. He's a nightmare for some of these corners that are like 5'10" trying to cover him. It's like, you're not going to stop the 6'2" guy who can jump and high point a football. It's just not going to happen. So it's weird. It's a tough one. He opens the season as the wide receiver 42, which would translate to 100 overall. His ADP is 105. I think that's about fair. I don't really have much in the way of pushback on that idea. Do you guys have anything pushback related? Are people crazy?
I think I'm out on Sutton, and just like I put the note of, he had 10 touchdowns last year, and in points per game, he was wide receiver 39. Like, that's really hard to do. Like, and whether it's his fault or not, I don't know. But I think there's no upside whatsoever, especially with a rookie quarterback. I'll take one of like the kind of second tier rookies that are going in that range, even guys like Curtis Samuel, Jacoby Myers, players like that. I'll just take, and I just don't see it. I mean, maybe if he gets traded at the trade deadline and gets on a really good team is like the only hope towards upside. But I'm not very excited about Cortland Sutton with Bo Nix as the starter.
I think probably a little bit more optimistic than Mike is, but I think it's totally fair that if you have 10 touchdowns and you're still falling outside of wide receiver 30, that's really tough. I mean, you only had 59 catches last season, so that means 1 out of every 6 catches is going for a touchdown. That's pretty remarkable too. So there's just a bunch of weird and wild stats on Sutton from last season. But if he can stay healthy, and he can play the full season again, you have 87 targets of Jerry Jeudy that are going to have to be redistributed somehow. You would expect a bulk of those, or you would hope a bulk of those would go to Sutton. So, I mean, I think there might be a little more upside than what Mike mentioned, but it's tough. He's not a guy you're drafting to be a starter at all this season. He's your first guy off your bench, maybe your second wide receiver off your bench.
He's a 9th round pick. And by that point, if you're drafting how I play, you've got 4 wide receivers and 3 running backs, and you're already like you've maybe are looking at like a tight end or a quarterback even before him. And I usually wait on those things. So yes, he is firmly a bench player. He's a bye week fill-in guy. He's a good matchup guy. It's not something you're going to count on week in, week out. But the nice thing about that is that's baked into the ADP at this point. No one is asking me to do anything crazy, but I do agree. His upside is capped, but I also think his floor is somewhat capped because of the other issues with this team. Like that's kind of where we are. Like he's going to get his by virtue of lack of other options. Because we've mentioned there's only 3 guys that are in draftable range. We've already covered 2 of them. He's the 3rd. So he will be the one on this team, and he's going to get his. So I think there is something to be said for the 80 targets is really what swings it for me, Vishaal. You kind of hit the nail as it relates to me. I don't think he's going to get 50 of those, but I bet he gets 30. Because we're going to go through the rest of it here rapid fire, and I'm going to tell you. You tell me who you think is a threat to that. You tell me who you think is a realistic threat to stopping him. Because I agree. Capped upside, but I'm not being asked to start him week in, week out. I could just kind of roll with it. What scares me more is some of the other stuff on this list. Marvin Mims is the next name. So we saw Mims. He's coming into year 2. The man can fly. I'll give him that much. The man has got wheels on wheels on wheels, and I am very much looking forward to seeing him running kicks with the new kickoff and punt rule. Man, that's going to be fun. But Marvin Mims is coming in as the wide receiver 72, translates to 178 overall. He's going outside of draftable range by ADP at 198. So the public is a little not committed to this idea. And I'll be honest, I'm nervous about Mims because I think they're going to stick him on the outside and say, hey, Marvin, run down the field with your hand up. And I do not like guys like that for fantasy. It might pay you out. In best ball, Marvin Mims all day. Love it. If I don't have to pick and figure out the weeks where he's going to go off for 2 deep touchdowns on 4 targets, great. Love it. But I don't want to be sitting there on Saturday trying to set my lineup like, is this the week Marvin Mims gets open, takes the type off the defense, and actually catches it? I don't know. And anyone who tells you they do know, by the way, is lying to you. So, that's what scares me about Marvin Mims. Are either of you bullish on Mims taking the leap in year 2?
No, not really. If you get return yards,
thanks, Dr.
Right?
Evil.
if you get return yards for points there, then for sure, all in on.
We keep bringing that up, but we have done more kick and punt return league advice this year than in any other year. And we've been doing this since 2016.
Well, the new rules.
I've never done more advice on this. Like
the new rules, people might be shifting that way. Maybe not year one.
If Randall Cobb hadn't have retired, this was the time, Randall. Not since 2009 have I talked more about this. It's incredible.
Yeah, but not interested. I'm more interested in the next guy. If you want to just
we're gonna get into the next guy because the next guy is what I think a lot of people. Vishaal, anything nice to say about Marvin Mims, or is that
no? I mean, if he wasn't gonna produce with Russell Wilson and his patented moonball, then what is he gonna do with one of these guys who probably doesn't have as good of a deep ball accuracy as Wilson did? Then it's not gonna work out this year for him.
I would co-sign that because I've seen Zach Wilson try to throw the deep ball and it looks like this, and it's like it doesn't go well, and then I don't know. Bo Nix is like the mystery box. Maybe he can do it, but I'm not counting on it.
No,
the one that a lot of people are more interested in, and this goes back to my shiny new toy theory, just because he hasn't let you down yet, is this year's rookie wide receiver, which is the other thing, by the way, that scares me about Marvin Mims. If they really love you, why were they continuing to draft wide receivers with the limited draft picks they had? They didn't even have a first round pick. You know what I mean? So they went and got Troy Franklin. Troy Franklin, I know, is a lot of people's, they loved him in the pre-draft process. I wish Mason was, this is where we would have lost it because Mason would have spent 20 minutes on this. And I would have had to be trying to rein him back in. But I know a lot of people really like Troy Franklin as a prospect, as a college, evaluative type of thing. And he wound up here. And then when he wound up here, a lot of people were it's like, what a waste. I'm not the biggest Troy Franklin guy as a prospect and also as a landing spot thing, but I get it. Opens as the wide receiver 77, which translates to 201 overall in the ECR. So the expert community is also not getting on this hype train, but the public has him at 187. So what that tells me is the public is willing to take Troy Franklin as their last positional player, last player on their team, period, and just see what you get. I'm not a big fan for various reasons. Rookie quarterback, he's a little unpolished for me, and I just don't know what his job would be on this team. So I'm not super into it. Make me a believer, Mike. What do you like?
I liked Troy Franklin a little bit more in the pre-draft process. I think everyone was a little bit surprised that he fell to the 4th round, which in a deep wide receiver class, it's a little bit more understandable. The one thing I like, I mean, you're throwing a dart at this point, right? It's your last pick or whatever, and you're throwing a dart. There's opportunity here because Courtland Sutton is not this big target hog that we mentioned before. What was it, 80 targets last year with Russell Wilson? So, there's room for someone to step up. And if he's just a good player, like a lot of people think he is, then he could have opportunity. And he has the connection with Bo Nix, same college. So there's that at least, I actually thought it was okay. At least he sucks he went in the 4th round because that doesn't normally pan out well for receivers or for most players. But okay, at least he got paired with Bo Nix and his college quarterback. There's that we can build off of. So it's throwing a dart. You hold on to him for the first couple of weeks, see what he does. And if he's not getting playing time or whatever, then you just cut him. So, but I did like him. I like his speed. I think he can play mostly on the outside. And, Broncos just need someone to catch the ball. So
they do need someone to catch the ball.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like there's enough volume in this Broncos passing offense that a wide receiver 2 can become really fantasy relevant at all. It doesn't seem worth it to me. I'd rather just stick with one of these running backs on the team, whether it's McLaughlin or Williams or whoever, rather than take a flyer on Troy Franklin. I just think there's going to be way more running back carries than there's going to be pass attempts in this offense. That's what I would do, at least if I was Sean Payton going into this year. It just doesn't seem like there's nearly enough.
I'd be pound the damn ball. And that's what we're going to do because we got rookies everywhere. And Troy Franklin, if we were talking about dynasty, I could have a different conversation with you if you're willing to be patient in dynasty and wait. But here's my other problem. The other 2 guys on this team in the wide receiver room are Josh Reynolds and Tim Patrick.
Yeah.
And if Tim Patrick didn't keep blowing out his Achilles, we would have never stopped talking about Tim Patrick because he's actually good. And it's like, and then Josh Reynolds, we've seen when he's healthy, is a professional NFL wide receiver. He's not amazing, but he's a true professional. So the problem is that
3 or 4 on an NFL roster. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, and that's my issue is that you've got 2 guys that are real veterans that know what they need to do to be on the field. So you have to beat out those guys. And that could happen, but it ain't going to happen quickly. Troy Franklin's going to be buried on the depth chart. He's going to be like the wide receiver 5. And then maybe halfway through, the year, it flip-flops. But I'm not drafting that in a redraft league. I'll pick him up off waivers after whoever drafted him cuts him. Like there are other flyers I like at the end of the draft way more that have a much easier path to playing time with better quarterback situations, more clear roles. I just don't see the appeal. I think what happens is people see how fast Troy Franklin is, and that's the one thing I will concede. He's fast. Noted. Like, can he catch? I have concerns. Can Bo Nix put it in a place where he even could catch it? I have more concerns. Like, I want to see what's going to happen. Like, my fear with Bo Nix is that the game is going to speed up so much from college to the pros that he's just going to be like, he's going to freeze and he's going to pull the ball down and start running. And that's not what I want to watch. I need him to show me that the game's not too fast at the pro level. So that's where we are. By the way, people need to not forget about Tim Patrick. Like I said, if Tim Patrick didn't blow out his Achilles and his ACL and then his Achilles 2 consecutive years, we would be talking about Tim Patrick. That man is a baller. Like, the question is how much speed has he lost from missing 2 years of football? But you got to understand, like, Tim Patrick didn't sign that 3-year deal when Sean Payton or current ownership was here. So they think enough of him that they gave him a 1-year prove-it deal despite the fact that he missed 2 years and he wasn't their guy. That tells me that, like, they've seen something that they're willing to be like, whatever. Like, give the man a shot. 1-year prove-it deal. What do we got to lose? At least he did that much, because it would have been very easy to just be like, just let him go. Who cares? Like there's no money left on this deal. Like, easy enough. We could go get one of our guys. And they proved they were willing to do that by getting Reynolds. I mean, man, they could have kept little Jordan Humphrey to make Sean Payton happy. You know what I mean? There's any number of guys like that they could have dealt with. And they chose to give Tim Patrick one more shot. So we'll see what happens. Greg Dulcich at tight end. The perennial, if you could only stay healthy. Opens at tight end 36. Translates to 281 overall. 258 ADP. Nobody is interested in Greg Dulcich, despite how good the hair is. Man, if I had hair like that, if I had hair like that, I would basically be untouchable. Man, that man has got a Fabio level haircut, and it is truly impressive. But will that translate to him actually being successful in the NFL, Mike?
Maybe, but I'm not drafting him. He's a waiver wire guy, if anything. So we'll be, in October or something. But I'm not,
you're not buying into the camp reports that he's the Joker. He's the new Taysom Hill.
That was last year too.
It's also this year. It's both years. Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's happened before and it's happening currently. We've learned nothing. Yeah. It's like the movie Groundhog Day. We're just doing it again. Like, what do you think, Vishaal? Any optimism for Greg Dulcich? Anything about this that strikes you as interesting?
No, not at all. I'll repeat it again. There's just not enough volume in this passing game to justify taking the tight end on this team who hasn't proven anything. So definitely not.
Adam Trautman is also still there because, much like Samaje Perine, he is smart enough to know that as long as he just does whatever Sean Payton tells him to do, he will always have a job with Sean Payton. We all work other jobs. I'm sure we all work with people like that. I work with people like that where it's like the only reason you're employed is because you work for this guy or this lady, and because they know that you will do whatever they tell you, and you're smart enough to know that as long as you do whatever they tell you, you'll keep getting paid every 2 weeks. So it's just like, we have all seen that in the real world. That's what's happening with Adam Trotman. But I can't say too much negative about Adam Trotman because as a University of Dayton alumni, we get so few football players that I can't put the knife in. I can't do it. I'm not allowed. I'm contractually obligated. Got to be a little nice about Adam Trotman. He's a very malleable person, that Adam Trotman. He's very intelligent to know where his bread is buttered and to not rock the boat and to just show up every day with coffee and donuts and to be a team player. You know what I mean? It's not the worst thing you could be. But yeah, Greg Dulcich is like, I get it. I get the appeal when he's actually out there. He's fast for his size. But that's the thing. The training camp videos are out of him running right now and running routes. And it's like, he's in pads, but it's like, I get every time I see him run routes, it's just like, I get it. I get why in July they see this guy and it's like, man, look at that. But it's just one of those things where it's like, he's got to be able to stay healthy. And he has never been healthy since even going back to college. Like, he's just never healthy. So we'll see. Gentlemen, final thoughts on the Broncos. I think we covered it. Boy, this was a slog. But I co-signed my thought. My final thought is I co-sign the idea that there are 3 draftable things on this roster, 2 of which I'm actually interested in. And nothing else is draftable.
Yeah, it's not great. I think it's Jaleel McLaughlin for me at this point, and
that's the one I have.
Probably it. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, don't trust any of these guys to win you your league this year. They're flyers. They're bench guys to fill in during bye weeks with limited upside overall for the entire roster. So that's the way to view this Denver Broncos team. And don't take any of their quarterbacks. It's not going to work out. I promise. It's just not.
No, it's going to be ugly. And yeah, we'll leave it there. So that's all we have to say. I tell you what, tomorrow, in the listening audience's world, we have a happier show because tomorrow we will be talking about the Detroit Lions. So tune in for that as a nice little palate cleanse. Get the taste of this out of your mouth. And so check that out. But until we talk to you tomorrow, keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!